today on May 19th. Thanks for joining us. We are talking about how to fix a broken culture. Today's session is brought to you by Taking Point Academy, our new e-learning course, very sophisticated e-learning course with our flagship product that is a certification course on leading change. So learning how to better lead change, manage change, and achieve desired outcomes in any organization. So check it out at takingpointacademy.com. Don't worry, we will remind you again at the end. And of course, all of our resources and information about our company at takingpointleadership.com. So let's dive in. I think we first need to start by talking about what culture is. Obviously, there's a lot of talk these days, always has been, about what is a good culture, what is a broken culture, how do we fix it? But more importantly, what we like to talk about, as you know, and what we do in our work with organizations is how do you design and manage a culture appropriately to achieve very specific outcomes, in many cases, business outcomes, financial results, profitability, all the things you want to measure from talent acquisition to talent retention to performance to customer experience, all that drives profitability. So we want to keep this conversation around how do we measure these things, but ultimately we'll look at what is a culture. There's many different definitions. I don't usually like to adhere to a lot of those standards, but essentially in its simplest form, I think you would agree with this, Mathew, is that culture is essentially how people think, act, and behave in an organization. And it comes about, as you know, in two ways. One is kind of more typically haphazard, over time, not well managed. As we know, you have a culture, either way, it's good, bad, or somewhere in between, whether you like it or not. But when you're winning at culture, it is by design, it's well managed, it's very associated with the organization's mission, purpose, core values. All those things are measurable, and everybody actually believes and has some level of emotional connectivity to the purpose of the organization's, its values orientation, and their clarity on roles and responsibilities and what they need to get done. I remember when I was first looking at the possibility of making that transition from corporate finance to naval special warfare, one of the things that attracted me in a lot of the research I did and the books that I was reading, that NSW, arguably one of the most high-performing organizations in the world, we're not perfect, but we're pretty good at a very well-designed, well-managed culture that achieves outcomes on the battlefield. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. I think a great culture leverages the organization's unique mission, their purpose, their values, that they use to enhance the identity, to inspire their employees, and to deliver the desired results. I think that's a big thing. What I find interesting is there's most organizations understand the critical importance of building and maintaining a great culture, but most of them fail to develop one due to disruption and change. As a matter of fact, they said due to disruption and change, about only 2 out of 10 employees, feel connected to their company culture, and that's an astonishing fact, right? And so I think what's interesting too is you can utilize disruption and change as an opportunity, and you shouldn't think of it as a threat. You should be able to utilize that to reset and transform your culture, even to make it more successful than it was.
Well, and it's kind of that, Marshall Goldsmith philosophy, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, of what got you here won't get you there. And oftentimes the cultural elements, the people practices, the strategy, the tactics, and all those things that get an organization to one level of growth or sustainability or achievement are not always going to be the same. So we don't want to adhere to the principle of, well, the culture is what it is, or the values are what they are. Those things oftentimes need to evolve as the organization evolves. And so to the topic of how to fix a broken culture, I mean, obviously there's various facets of that. Your culture could have a hairline fracture, some low-hanging fruit there, things you need to shore up, like behavior, rituals, even obviously process, procedure. Culture can be obviously very much a byproduct of, process adherence or failure to adhere to process, simple things like that. Or sometimes your culture is a full-on compound fracture, one fragment of blood, red mist everywhere. Everybody knows it. By the time people start talking about it, it's been broken for a really, really long time, right?
Yeah.
There's no tourniquets applied. There's no triage being done.
Well, I think what's even, more interesting is that there are a lot of people that see this happening, but then they don't say anything, right? And there's that old philosophy, see something, say something. And so if you do that, you tend to catch things a little bit earlier, but some people are just, they're a little bit apprehensive, right, to call certain things out, and then just like you said, it turns into this, massive bloody mess. And then everybody's like, oh, hey, I think our culture's we need to work on it. And you're like, well, everybody saw this coming like a year out.
Right. Well,
If not
and the thing
longer.
too is there's very clear metrics to see when things are wrong that should at least raise a red flag, especially to the leaders across the organization, that maybe something's off here. Maybe we do have a culture problem when employee turnover starts increasing. People are leaving. Your top talent is leaving. I'm not talking about, the bottom echelons of people that cause healthy turnover, but your top talent is walking out the door. Your customer experience sucks. Your customers are leaving. So there's customer turnover. All of these things are driving your costs up and profitability down. Those are very, very clear financial metrics that you have a culture problem. And so something needs to be done about that. And of course, there's various different ways to do it. So I wanted to talk real quickly about, how do you assess? And you should do this when your culture seems to be good too. It's always good to have a pulse on how things are going. What is the sentiment of the team and the employees in the organization, and how those relate to values, orientation, and culture. But there's several ways. Obviously, there's different types of surveys you can do. Employee engagement surveys. We have our team dynamic survey that measures very much behavioral things around trust, accountability, commitment, levels of engagement, collaboration, things like that. But also just good old fashioned asking, asking people.
Yeah.
How do you feel about what's going on in the organization? How are people being treated? Are we adhering to our core values? Gosh, are our core values actually authentic and utilized in the organization to align people to common goals? You see that all the time. I mean, what was the data you shared with me earlier today? It's only about 24% of employees actually feel connected to the company's values. And that's assuming those values are even authentic in the first place. So we think, and this is part of our methodology, is you should have a blend of asking people, so doing interviews across the organization at all levels, having good surveys, analyzing that data, and then looking at where are your strengths that you can capitalize on, where are you falling short from a culture standpoint, and what type of action plan can you put in place to fix those issues. The challenge there, as we see all the time, is a little bit of a hesitancy to invest time in actually driving culture transformation, because, and stand by, it does take time, resources, and I don't just mean people. I mean, it takes sometimes budget to fix these things in the organization. So it's one thing that we want to focus on today. But ultimately, since we are a management consulting firm focused on businesses and business performance, all of these things drive results, for better or worse. Bad culture drives crappy results. Good culture drives good results. It's all financially tied together. So let's pull up the results pyramid, because I think this is going to give us a good framework for the rest of the discussion here when it comes to looking at, on the left, obviously we have this 4-tiered pyramid. This is Team Leadership's culture transformation results pyramid. On the left, you have a team, an organization, could even be a project, but for today, we'll say it's an organization in its current state. So for the purposes of this YouTube Live, we're talking about culture. On the right there, you see the desired future state of the organization, desired results, growth, whatever strategic initiatives you're trying to achieve in an organization, or exit strategies, or financial outcomes, or sales. That's you on the right side, but also oftentimes there has to be a little bit of a culture transformation and shift in mindset, behavior, rituals to achieve new desired outcomes. You were talking, Mathew, about organizational change. And I want you to give some of your real world examples, from your 30 illustrious years in naval special warfare. So you've dealt with this a lot, complex organization. But, for the audience, looking at the pyramid here, at the top, we have results. So anything in the organization you are trying to measure, typically you want to put some sort of dollar sign, metric, or percent to that, regardless of whatever it is. The second tier are the actions, everything everyone in the organization individually and collectively needs to do to achieve those results as an organization. On the left side, these are the existing results the company, the organization is achieving to date. What have we accomplished? Where are we? Revenue, EBITDA, profitability, whatever we're measuring, this is our current state. And the third tier, this is where we get into obviously the behavioral and cultural elements, is mindset. Mindset's driven by values. Mindset drives behavior. Or is the behavior or the mindset of the people in the organization aligned towards common goals? Are they misaligned? Somewhere in between? Usually it's somewhere in between. And then looking at the bottom tier, R stands for rituals. What type of rituals and cultural experiences do we have in the organization that are by design, haphazard, or more importantly, what rituals do we need to institutionalize in the organization on a regular basis, creating new habits, new mindset, new behavior to drive sometimes new actions when you're talking about transformation to achieve desired outcomes. We were talking about this before, and I know you led a very significant organizational transformation initiative in the latter part of your career. So I wanted to hear about that because all these things tie again to achieving desired results and outcomes for any organization.
Yeah, so I love this model because it really kind of walks through the steps that we went through. But I think our desired result was to divest and transform two organizations into a singular, highly functional entity. So that was really kind of our desired result. As far as the actions, I mean, there were just multiple actions were involved in this transformation. But we saw is an opportunity to enhance and pull a multiple capabilities under one umbrella. And then the primary action or objective was really buy-in and acceptance to assure adaptability. As far as the mindset, I think the belief was the transformation would ensure a higher operational tempo with multifaceted engagements worldwide. So we also ensured that the behaviors needed were harmonious with the overall objective of developing a very diverse operational capability. And then when we got down into the rituals and the cultural experiences in that, within our organization, the rituals and the cultural experiences, they're already embedded into the organizations. We just needed to ensure smooth transition by ensuring transparency, cross-functional team collaboration, training, interoperability, and then really just a one team mentality. So that's what we did, and it went off without a hitch, and we were very successful.
Let me ask you something, Mathew. When you're looking at culture's role in organizational transformation, especially looking at obviously step one is analyzing the existing strengths and weaknesses or areas of opportunity of that culture. Because again, culture is a force multiplier when it comes to organizational growth, organizational change, achieving winning outcomes, being a high performing team. When we get it wrong, obviously you're going to fall short of meeting objectives every single time. So analyzing the cultural elements of the organization are critical, and looking at, and all doing this in real time, sometimes simultaneously with other transformative initiatives, is how can we capitalize on the strengths that we have? Like, what do we do really well when it comes to culture and behavior and values orientation in our organization? Where are we falling short? Let's tackle those to make sure that those aren't going to hold us back from achieving any type of change initiative or ability to attract and retain talent, retain customers, drive profitability. All those things are critically important to make sure that the organization's achieving the results necessary to fulfill its vision. When you're looking at that, though, oftentimes we see this. What's your take on this? I mean, you could just toss this over the fence to HR and they could fix it, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, that's not the case. I mean, the reality is that you have to go deep. When there's that type of cultural transformation, you need to really like we do here at Taking Point. We do a lot of assessments, right? Because that really kind of defines what's actually happening within the organization. You can take a look at those results, and then from there, you can come up with some great ideas on how to engage with that to make sure that we're looking at profitability. We're looking at scaling the organizations. We're looking at processes. We're looking at all those things to make sure that overall the culture itself will change and move from its current state to the future state that the organization wants. And I think if you don't have buy-in, that can also become a little bit problematic, right? So I think we just did an assessment here recently, and we had incredible buy-in on that assessment. So that the organization is invested, that the organization wants to change, and they want to move from their current state to their future state. And that's a big part of it, right? Because you can say, hey, we need to change our culture, but if the individuals within the organization don't have buy-in or don't feel that they have any say within that transformation, then they might be like, and just like you said earlier, one foot may already be stepping out the door, and then because the culture remains the same, the other foot goes right behind it, and then you lose your top talent or your high potentials.
That tees up a great question we have in the chat, and then a follow-on statement. So I'll address both at the same time in the time we have left. Is the question is great. It's how is culture and identity redefined when an organization is constantly reorganizing? We see this a lot, for whatever reason. And so the second part of the question is, how do you express the need? So how do you express and evangelize and drive the need for a defined mission, vision, and guidance from the C-suite leadership team? So oftentimes as organizations continue to drive change, they're always reorganizing. There's a lot of competing priorities, obviously stuffed in there. Sometimes you need to take a tactical pause, like we always talk about, and look at, are these decisions, first of all, even in line with the company's mission? Do we need to take another look maybe at the mission statement? First of all, is that mission statement authentic? Is it measurable down to every word and every phrase, to performance management systems, to financial outcomes? And then the comment below it is having a well-defined mission statement out in front and always coming back to it is critically important as your foundation, as your guiding light. That really should be the beacon that drives decision. Same thing with core values. And oftentimes we run into this issue, sometimes a challenge, to ensure that you get buy-in from the very top. It's got to be across the organization, but buy-in from everybody in the C-suite, including sometimes the boardroom, that we need to take a look at these things. They cannot be deprioritized over sales, over other operational, changes that need to be made, regardless of whatever sort of strategic imperatives the organization's driving. The culture piece has to play a major role in the strategy, in every aspect of it, because it will drive long-term sustainable change to whatever those goals and initiatives are that are being driven. But as soon as we deprioritize those elements, or we know that we have fractures in the culture, yet we're driving towards this to glory town, you're never going to get to glory town unless you fix those elements along the way and make sure they are constantly managed, constantly measured, constantly talked about. It's not a one and done thing, right? It has to be constantly looked at to ensure that there's buy-in across the board, that any type of culture initiative is going to drive those outcomes like we talked about. Attracting top talent, retaining your best talent, making sure that all the behavioral elements and rituals are designed to achieve specific outcomes, alignment, collaboration, communication. So starting with the assessments, from surveys to interviews, really looking deep and having a committee or a task force, a culture transformation task force, if you will, to look at, and that should be a very diverse group from across the organization, especially the people who have a very strong values orientation, to look at, all right, let's analyze this data. Let's do something with it. But here's the thing. If we're going to include as many or maybe all of the people in the organization in driving feedback and providing insight, providing data, like you said before, if it shows a high degree of hope and opportunity when you have a lot of people giving feedback, even if their feedback's not that great and very constructive, if you will. But then that's oftentimes where organizations fall short. And they collect all that data, it sits on some digital shelf. Check the box. We did surveys, engagement's okay, good enough, but we got to get back to selling stuff. That's not going to work. It's literally better to do nothing, right? Do you agree with that? It's better to do nothing than to gather all this insight, all this feedback, especially around culture initiatives, and then take no action.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, kind of like what we said earlier, 65% of the CEOs see disruption and change as an opportunity, right? And they see that as a way to really kind of align their mission, their purpose, and their values with their culture. And I think that's a big part of it too. If you are misaligned in all of those things, that can become problematic. And, people see that, so you have to be very authentic. You definitely have to take all the data points and everything you have, and you have to engage with your people, and you have to make sure that they see that you're engaging with them to go ahead and, move that culture and move that needle forward.
Awesome. Love it. Well, that is it for today. We are at time. Guys, thank you so much for either listening in live today or checking out the recording. Again, we have a lot of resources that talk about this topic and give you very step-by-step tools, frameworks, and methodologies for analyzing your culture, using that data to drive action planning and culture transformation initiatives. A lot of resources at takingpointleadership.com, from books to ebooks to all of our many, probably hundreds of Forbes articles that we've written over the past 10 years. So check those out. And also, again, this was brought to you by Taking Point Academy. So check out takingpointacademy.com. Our flagship course is a certification course in leading change, and it's very, very culture oriented in its curriculum. So thank you guys so much. And until then, keep taking point.